The effects of substrate materials on subsequent growth in Raphanus sativus L. microgreen harvest by Stephen Jameson with Dr. Julie Tolman Thompson. Improvements in farming techniques can actively encourage global reaching benefits. This thought may conjure ideas of major refinements in equipment or technology affecting giant fields of corn. But the smaller urban farms that are becoming more popular as we progress in population and city expansion are quickly changing those ideas. Society is rapidly arriving at a part of its evolution to a point where entire communities can rely on a local space to provide needed produce for its everyday consumption instead of using complex logistical tactics of importation. This urban agricultural phenomenon has grown over the years for many reasons, each specific to the plot of land or rooftop that it covers. While most of the benefits from these efforts seem to be limited and very local, when taken collectively, there's a significant environmental impact that results from them. This reawakening of ancestral community has the potential to change our modern society to once again bring us together for a common needed cause. People that work to grow their food together will in turn have a higher sense of collective embodiment, reducing crime, reducing hunger, and vast improvements of natural city beautification. Society is currently realizing that giant farmlands are not necessary to support local communities, and although we're absolutely not to the point where we can simply forego modern agriculture or even remotely dilute its importance to the survival of the general populace, it cannot be underestimated that urban farming is in its infancy of doing just that. Reports state that 800 million people worldwide grow vegetables or fruit or raise animals in cities, producing an astonishing 15 to 20% of the world's food. There are many merits and flaws with urban farming, some listed by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, are that vegetables have a short production cycle. Some can be harvested within 60 days of planting, so are well suited for urban farming. Garden plots can be up to 15 times more productive than rural holdings. An area of just 1 square meter can provide 20 kilograms of food a year. Urban vegetation growers spend less on transportation, packaging, and storage and can sell directly through street food stands and market stalls. More income goes to them instead of the middleman. Urban agriculture provides employment and income for poor women and other disadvantaged groups. Horticulture can generate one job every 100 square meters of garden and production, input supplies, marketing, and value addition from producer to consumer. However, in many countries, UPA goes unrecognized in agricultural policies and urban planning. Growers often operate without permits. Since it's officially invisible, the sector receives no public assistance or oversight in many of these cities. Unfortunately, urban agriculture carries health and environmental risks. Potential use of contaminated land and water smells and noise pollution and inappropriate use of pesticides and of raw organic manure can leak into water sources. These issues require proper attention. Despite these disadvantages, seeing these superlative community advancements in agricultural design and the transition to the concentration of extreme locally grown produce leads to the important question of what is next. In the last 100 years, we have gone from a society that truly believed bigger is better to a technologically advanced civilization that knows smaller is cheaper, faster, energy efficient, easier to transport, globally available, and all around better. We can especially see this in computer designs, but it has affected the global socioeconomic status of multi-billion-dollar conglomerate corporations and entire countries down to the single human entrepreneur. It is my belief that we will also see the same advancing result in agriculture as advancements and knowledge become readily available to the average person, we can soon look forward to the miniaturization of agriculture. Just as the urban agricultural boom is taking place right now, we will soon see another widespread cultural change when each individual will grow their own nutritious source of vegetables in their very own homes. This will not only be helpful in maintaining nutritional health, but will also be economically sound, create educational value, and be extremely convenient. The following research investigates answering the question of what is next. Our goal is to take those first steps into creating a world where everyone has access to a constant and free supply of nutritious foods that are grown in the convenience of their own home for everyday use. The main hypothesis for this experiment is that differing substrates of the pre-soak process of microgreen growth can have a direct effect concerning the total germination rates. Microgreens are the seedling shoots which are picked just after the first leaves of the plant have developed. Studies suggest that microgreens may contain high concentrations of nutrients compared with mature vegetables and herbs. Due to their high antioxidant content, microgreens are considered to be a functional food, a food that promotes health and prevents disease. The microgreen variety of the North American Raphanus sativus L has been found to contain significant amounts of glucosinolate, a well-known anti-carcinogenic, and are an excellent source of folate, which is believed to promote cardiovascular health. An assessment of differing substrates used for the growth of Raphanus sativus L microgreens was performed during the initial 24-hour soaking phase of the single jar growth method. The purpose of this experiment will be to find if ranging growth changes in the actual count of harvest could be amplified by variables in the initial cleaning and soaking of the seeds. Several different substrates are being used during this experiment, including purified water, a saline solution, marketed plant growth hormone, filtered animal fecal extract, and one containing no substrate at all. It is the goal of this experimental research to gain insight into better ways to grow microgreens using the single jar method. This information could have massive ramifications in humanitarian efforts of feeding people affected by disaster relief programs. It could be used in upcoming extended space missions, and it could benefit world economies regarding residential, commercial, and industrial food industries. In the traditional method of single jar growth of microgreens, the seeds are soaked for a 24-hour period in clean water. Although this step is not mandatory in the growth of microgreens, it is considered common knowledge that certain varieties of microgreens will sprout easier when the hard shell that surrounds the seed has been softened with moisture. This will also allow for quicker germination time and more even growth of stems and first leaves. It is within this time frame that the variables of this experiment take place. What is Raphanus sativus L? Well, for our research, we will be delving into the radish variant known as Raphanus sativus L. This is an edible root vegetable commonly called the radish. They're part of the family Brassicaceae and was domesticated out of Europe in the pre-Roman times. Today, they're eaten throughout the world and come in a variety of sizes, flavors, and colors. The radish seed germinates most readily when exposed to constant temperatures of 55 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. However, they will sprout at temperatures as low as 40 degrees and as high as 85 degrees. Concerning this particular research, we're concentrating on growth rates from seed to microgreen, or first leaf sprout, under optimal conditions for Raphanus sativus L. This should take place in 3 to 6 days of growth. While the pre-soaking stage helps with germination and other growth factors, the question of this particular research is if the substrate used during this time is an actual opportunity for the seed to also soak in essential nutrients that will affect the actual germination rate. By using known methods of pre-soaking, such as purified water, and comparing those harvest counts with the known method of using no substrate, we'll then have the ability to compare and contrast the germination rates and the seedling growth of the other three unknown effects of substrates. The following is the list of all the experimental substrates that we're going to use. The first is purified water. Since the normal single jar growth method uses normal water as the substrate in the widely known technique, we'll be conducting our experiment with this as the control group. It's basically just distilled water. The next is no substrate at all. The first variable use of substrate will be conducted using no pre-wash. From previously viewed experimentation, the 24-hour pre-wash stage can be completely omitted depending on the seed type. I believe that Raphanus sativus L needs this stage to properly initiate germination. Therefore, I hypothesize that the omission of this process will cause the seeds to not sprout, leaving the post-harvest count at 0. The third experimental substrate we're going to use is a saline solution, salt water. Several experiments have been done over the salinity content of microgreens in the use of salt water as a pre-soaking method. Some of the experiments have shown stunted growth patterns, but the results were inconclusive within the relative research. It is believed that within the confines of this experiment we will have a slightly lower post-harvest yield than with the control group. To make our salt solution, we used 10 grams of iodized sea salt poured into a graduated cylinder containing 180 milliliters of distilled water. We then added more water to the cylinder to a final volume of 200 milliliters. This created a 10% saline solution. The fourth experimental substrate is Miracle-Gro Performance Organics All-Purpose Plant Nutrition Granules. This very well-known plant growth enhancement product has been used around the world and is shown to be effective in producing higher yields of garden vegetables. It is my belief that this will be the highest performing substrate that will produce a post-harvest count of 1.35 that of our control group. Our last experimental substrate is organic llama liquid fertilizer. Found locally made with llama fecal matter, this product boasts to be 100% non-GMO and is praised by Colorado herb growers to increase product yield. Due to the non-scientific nature of this product, yet also regarding the high praise from local growers, I believe that this will increase the post-harvest yield of this experiment by at least 1.2. The use of microgreens as part of a nutritious diet was popularized in the late 1970s. Since then, there has been a plethora of scholarly articles published on the subject. While the nutritional values and various growth processes have been studied in detail, there aren't many published articles that are specifically related to the short time frame and specific processes involved with this particular experiment. The article entitled Seed Treatments to Advance Greenhouse Establishment of Beet and Chard Microgreens had detailed germination percentage changes with very little results. This experiment concentrated on the use of hydrogen peroxide, hydrogen chloride, and sodium hypochlorite. While these chemicals are excellent in the use of sterilization, it would do very little for our goals of obvious harvest growth changes within our dedicated time frame. The actual seed soaking methods were similar to ours in this experiment. In the referenced experiment, the seed soaking treatment concerned 50 seeds which were placed in a 50 milliliter glass beaker continuously aerated water or solution at 20 degrees Celsius. Seeds were soaked in deionized water for a time frame ranging from 48 to 2 hours. It was stated in this research that the seeds which were primed in the H2O2 substrate produced the fastest growing germination of all the differing solutions. This was not a viable substrate for our purposes, but the implementation of aeration during the soaking process should be included in future and longer maintained experimentation. Another similar article published in the International Journal of Biological Macromolecules entitled Effect of Salinity Stress on Bioactive Compounds and Antioxidant Activity of Wheat Microgreen Extract Under Organic Cultivation Conditions concentrated on differing salt content for this pre-soaking phase of growth. It was clearly stated in the article that salinity causes yield reductions in many glyphosate crop plants throughout the world. This is one of the main reasonings for my hypothesis over this particular substrate in that it would stunt the germination process. However, it is surprising that this resulted in a higher salt content of the actual microgreen harvest. This particular article gives me confidence in my hypothesis that all of the seeds will indeed be able to soak in the nutrients of a given substrate during this phase of growth. Let's talk about our research method and the design. The results of this experiment are strictly quantitative in nature and should consist of the ending successful germination rates after 7 days of growth. This experiment was conducted 2 different times that included each substrate in question. The results are the mean of corresponding germination counts found after the full 7 days of given growth time. The process of gaining these counts will be: first, we measure out 1 tablespoon of Raphanus sativus seeds. Then place each measurement of seed into separate containers of each substrate under examination 2 inches in depth. We'll let the seeds soak in these substrates for 24 hours, drain and dry the seeds, then we'll sanitize 5 new containers that will be used, the 16-ounce ball mason airtight canning jars. We'll then add the saturated seeds to each jar and place the jars in a temperature-controlled space that is out of direct sunlight and continue tracking the growth rate of each jar every 24 hours for 7 days. After the full 7 days of growth, we'll harvest all microgreens from each jar, individually clean all microgreens, then count each envelope of microgreens. These steps will then be repeated in additional time to cover any changes in experimental factors. The results of this experiment were quite interesting. 3 different categories of growth factors were examined during the last phase of this experiment. As you'll notice in the picture on the right of the screen, the top left, you can see a whole seed that shows no visible sign of germination, and the husk remains naturally hardened. Just below that, you'll notice a seedling with a broken husk that shows a small stem growth that's less than 1 inch. And then to the right, you can see the full microgreen seedling that has over 1 inch of growth. The results of this experiment were compiled using both a physical count of each individual seed and the sizes of each individual microgreen sprout. The germination rates for each substrate were found by taking the total number of seeds that had actually germinated divided by the total number of seeds used in that particular substrate. The length of the microgreen sprouts are also a major consideration in how well the substrates affected the initial growth cycle of the seedlings. This significant growth rate percentage was found by taking the total number of seeds in each separate substrate trial and dividing them by the total number of seeds that were found to have grown over 1 inch in length. In the above chart, we can see the results for the total experiment. You might notice that the water, the saline, and the llama fecal matter extract showed the absolute best results, while the negative control group and the Miracle Grow showed absolutely no germination whatsoever. From best to worst, we have llama fecal extract, water, saline, none, and then Miracle Grow. The individual results for each substrate during this experiment are as follows. Substrate number 1, distilled water, which was our control group. These were the second best results of the substrate experiment and were found in the control group, distilled water. The germination rate for this group was 29.07%. Out of the 946 seeds that were individually counted, 107 microgreen seedlings with over 1 inch of growth were found. The longest was 3.25 inches and had grown a single leaf. There were also 164 seedlings with broken husks and stem growth less than 1 inch. The significant growth rate for this portion of the experiment was 11.31%. Again, this was the second best result. Substrate number 2 was no pre-soaked substrate. These were the next to worst results that were found using no substrate at all. These results were found to be exactly as predicted and was stated to be the negative control group. Out of 840 seeds that were individually counted in this portion of the experiment, we had a 0% germination rate. Substrate number 3 was our saline solution, salt water. This substrate fell in the middle of our findings and was 10% saline solution. There was obvious germination activation in the 831 seeds that were used during this part of the experiment. 11 microgreen seedlings with over 1 inch of growth were counted. The longest was 2.5 inches, but had no single leaves. 42 seedlings were found to have started successful germination and were well on their way to growing into full adult plants. The rest of the seeds were left being in the non-germination group. We found the germination rate for a 10% saline solution soak to be 5.99% and have a significant growth rate of 1.24%. Substrate number 4, llama fecal matter extract. The best results were actually found in the llama fecal matter extract. Although not incredibly surprising results in this portion of the experiment, it was interesting that this product beat out all the others. Out of the 935 seeds that were hand counted, we found 139 microgreen seedlings with over 1 inch of growth. The longest was 3.25 inches, and several that had grown a single leaf. 215 seedlings with broken husks were found which had stem growth less than 1 inch, and 581 seeds that showed no visible germination and remained naturally hardened. This gives the llama fecal matter extract substrate a germination rate of 37.86% and a significant growth rate factor of 14.86. The final substrate, number 5, was Miracle Grow. The worst results were found in this substrate. This came as quite a surprise to me because the product is specifically designed for plant growth, and it would seem logical that if the seeds were able to soak in the nutrients through the shell during the initial process, then it should have been the substrate that showed the best results. Although it does specifically state on the product to use as directed, this experiment did not. We showed absolutely no seed germination using this product in our desired method. Out of 935 seeds that were used in this portion of the experiment, we had a 0% germination rate. The next to worst results were found using no substrate at all. These results were found to be exactly as predicted and was stated to be the negative control. Out of 840 seeds that were used in that portion of the experiment, we also had a 0% germination rate. There were several experimental limitations. Initially, a major limitation of this experiment was that the results would be based specifically on the post-harvest weight of the product. The original design of the product was set up this way. There are many other factors that are involved with gaining insight from differing substrates, ranging from a change in specific vitamin content to total nutritional value, or even a lack thereof. This type of information is beyond my personal ability to gain, but by splitting up the results of a physical seed count, I believe that I have gained much more insight than from a simple physical weight count. A major hurdle in this experiment was sterilization. 2 complete phases of all substrates that were tested were ruined by fungal infection. The first was found at day 5 out of 7 to be completely overrun to the point where I chose to throw out the jars instead of washing them and repeating the process. The second experiment was canceled at day 3 out of 7 when the same process was seen to begin. A firm bleaching of the entire area was accomplished, and the continuing experiments seemed to go much better. In retrospect, it was extremely difficult and time-consuming trying to count out thousands of seeds and separate each growth factor from the chosen substrates. In review of the article entitled "Seed Treatments to Advance Greenhouse Establishment of Beet and Chard Microgreens," they used a set experimentation limit of 50 seeds in each of their trials. This would have been a much easier way to determine exact data and analytics, and should definitely be taken into account when more experimentation like this is accomplished. Microgreens have the potential to affect world food population on a mass scale. They're easy to grow, extremely healthy, and highly transportable. This pre-soak stage experimentation could be vital for processes used in the future pertaining to emergency health crises around the world. Properly pre-soaked seeds could be growing in transport and arriving as ready-to-eat nutritional meals. The commercial value of these results could affect world economies. Although these results are a simplistic version of its potential, I have already had a plethora of parties ranging from local farmers to major charity organizations interested in the results and possibly willing to further this study with investments. One of my truly genius living idols is the entrepreneur, philosopher, and mass educator Peter Diamandis. He once stated in an inspirational speech over exponential technology that if you want to make $1 billion, then you need to come up with an idea that would positively affect the lives of 1 billion people. Through this simple experiment, I truly believe that I have come up with such an idea. There is, of course, a lot of work to do and much more research to accomplish. But as they say, every journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
If you want to become a billionaire, impact 1 billion people. And the realization I have is that 1,000 years ago, the only people who could impact a nation or a region were the kings and the queens. And at best, they could deploy their troops. 100 years ago, it was the industrialists, the robber barons, who could build the railroads, the steel mills, and affect the economy of a region or solve problems. Today, it's all of us. Anyone who is passionate and driven by a dream and who wants to solve a problem can, because we have access to extraordinary capabilities that only the largest government and corporations had 20 years ago. And so we're living in a very different day and age, a day and age where we can stop complaining about problems and start solving problems. And that truly gives me the greatest hope for where we're going.
In conclusion, the initial hypothesis for this experiment was that the vital nutrients found in a given substrate would be soaked into the seeds during the specific initial phase of growth that leads to germination. Although much more research needs to be accomplished to absolutely prove this is scientifically sound, the results of this experiment lean towards this being true. Taking the information gained by the negative control experiments where no seeds started their germination phase, along with the best results coming from the llama fecal matter extract substrate, we can invariably see the difference in specific germination rates. Thank you.